A few days after the attempted coup against Moi's government failed in 1982, Raila Odinga, one of Moi's main suspects, was arrested and tortured by government for more than 8 years, and the whole story starts one morning as Raila is sitting on a sofa inside one house in Nairobi. After thorough research and investigations, we finally answer the mystery of whether Raila Odinga had his manhood squeezed in detention after the coup attempt, or was it all lies? For Raila, the story begins one August morning in 1982 when he is handcuffed and led away by men in government vehicles while in Nairobi before being detained for 6 consecutive years in some of Kenya's harshest prisons. This is a story full of sweat, blood and tears, and it will explain much of why Raila does what he does. First of all, Raila had multiple times denied claims that he masterminded the 1982 coup attempt against Moi's dictatorship. He is, however, one of the biggest victims of the horrors that followed the coup. It's now on the first day of August 1982, a week before Raila's dramatic arrest and on the day of the coup d'etat itself. It's business as usual in Parklands, a neighborhood in the city inhabited mostly by Kenyans of Indian descent. Raila Odinga, a handsome man in his late 30s, is seated in his friend's house listening to a radio program together with the hosts. There is total silence in the room except for the radio announcer's voice. It's announced that the attempted coup that had been staged by a faction of the army was now under government control. The officers involved had been arrested while trying to escape to Tanzania. As he sits listening, Raila's stoic face does not betray whether or not he knows anything about this development. As days go by, Kenyans get eager to know what would be Moi's next power move after the coup attempt. It's now a few days before Raila's impending arrest in Caledonia. On the 11th of August, Raila is in the house of one of his comrades, the late Professor Oki Ooko Ombaka, in his house in Caledonia on Dennis Pritt Road. Officers from the special branch of police swing into the driveway of Raila Odinga's house demanding to see him. He's not there. They force his driver to take them where Raila was, and he takes them to Professor Ombaka's house in Caledonia. Raila is arrested moments later and banded into the police Land Rover. The events that come after would affect the course of Raila Odinga's life forever. After he was arrested, Raila found himself in the special police branch headquarters along University Way. At this location, which is near the Central Police Station, Raila was forced to sit on the floor of a cell like a common criminal. Suddenly, some senior police officers started arriving to hear this confession. The business of torturing and clobbering Mr. Odinga then started. They wanted him to confess that he had planned the aborted coup. Through a mouthful of blood from the beatings, Raila told his oppressors that he had nothing to do with it. The answer was not satisfactory to these officers, who continued to beat him up mercilessly. Next, he is thrown in a dark cell, locked in for the rest of the day without contact. Hours went by and Raila was praying and hoping that they would set him free. As the darkness started to descend, Raila was again thrown in a police Land Rover and transferred to the GSU headquarters in Mudangari. There, the next chapter to his torture would continue. Up to this point, Odinga had not eaten anything. Next, he was removed from his new cell and transferred into an interrogation room. In this room, he found a man called Josiah Kipkirui Rono, a special branch officer who had come to extract the truth from Raila Odinga by all means necessary. Rono and his henchmen locked the door and started hitting Raila like a thief, insisting that he confessed to plotting to topple President Moi. Raila remained silent. The beatings continued for the most of the night until Raila could take it no more. The more he refused to confess, the angrier Raila made Officer Kipkirui Rono. One day, towards the end, Rono got so frustrated with Raila that he removed a piece of wood from a rickety table and beat Raila with it until it broke into pieces. But it did not stop, and the other officers joined in the beating. As pieces of wood and boots landed on his head and body from every direction, Raila heard Rono cock a gun above his head. He shut his eyes, held his breath, and waited for Rono to shoot him in the head. Instead, Rono opened the door and left, ordering his subordinates to return Raila to his cell. When he had been moved to the GSU headquarters, Raila had learned that some other Luo leaders in Nairobi had also been arrested in connection to the attempted coup. These other detainees included the head of School of Engineering at the University of Nairobi, Professor Alfred Otieno, and the deputy editor of the Standard newspaper, Otieno Makonyango. The torture and questioning continued for days and nights until finally the National Police boss himself, Ben Gethi, came down to ask Raila to confess. Gethi had Raila brought in as the police boss was chewing on a piece of goat meat, and he immediately started his interrogation. He gave Raila Odinga a piece of paper and told him to write everything he knew about the coup. Raila wrote that he knew nothing, but rumors had reached him that Attorney General Charles Njonjo could be involved. Gethi tore up everything Raila wrote and gave him a fresh paper, but Raila did not change his story. When Raila stuck to his story, Gethi got very angry and left the room suddenly. Soon after, Ben Gethi was fired from his position and later arrested by Moi. Eventually, after weeks of torture, charges were brought against Raila Odinga and the other leaders, and they started to wait for the trial. As he awaited trial and remand in KAMITI maximum prison, Raila was given a pair of shorts that had a hole between the legs to wear, and the food the prisoners were served was no better than dog food. Raila Odinga and other political prisoners were locked in isolated prison cells with supervised bathroom breaks. On the day of the trial, Raila was charged with 13 crimes by the government prosecutor. However, on the 23rd of March 1983, hours before the trial, something strange and unexpected happened. Raila Odinga and the other detainees were hustled out of their cells, given presentable clothes, and then they were driven off to court. The judge informed them that all charges against them had been dropped and they were free to go. This was confusing but much welcome news. However, there was another twist coming. As Raila and his comrades celebrated their freedom outside the courthouse, a police Land Rover swooped in and they were again arrested by special branch officers and bundled into the car. They were then driven back to KAMITI prison without any new charges. This time they were placed in solitary confinement. Raila was now officially under detention. From that night in 1983, Raila remained in prison until 1988, being transferred between all major prisons in the country. He was finally released on February 5th, 1988. During his detention, Raila's wife Ida had been sacked from her job by Moi due to her campaigns for the release of Raila Odinga and other political detainees. During the period also, Raila's mother had died while he was in jail, but they did not tell him about it until 2 months after her death. After he was released in 1988, Raila Odinga continued to agitate for better governance, and Moi arrested him again 6 months after his release. This time, Moi accused Raila, Koigi Wamwere, and others of training militias in Libya to overthrow his government. This second detention lasted 10 months and sent Raila back to KAMITI maximum prison. When he was released, Raila went on to light another fire under Moi's behind, and yet again Moi detained him in 1990 after the famous Sabasaba March. The last detention of Raila Odinga ended in 1991, but his agitation for inclusion of every Kenyan community in government never stopped.